Please welcome Leonard and Medlock.
Straight A's from kindergarten through 12th grade, high test scores, passed several AP exams before I was a sophomore in high school. I went to a public school, which was ranked, at least according to Newsweek, as one of the top 5 high schools in the nation. I was a high achiever, and so it's kind of weird to think about how did I go from being a high achiever to having this lack of confidence and fear of not being. And what I chalk it up to is the high achiever's fallacy. And the high achiever's fallacy is basically this sorting and filtering and reinforcement cycle that I believe results from high stakes testing and then is perpetuated by teacher attitudes, parent attitudes, and peer-to-peer interaction. And it basically starts off, we're all dreamers. I can remember when I was in my grandmother's living room building tent cities, and I thought it was my magical castle, and I had the Legos on the floor and building these crazy contraptions. And I think it was the ITBS, Iowa Test of Basic Skills. That was the first one. And all of a sudden, I'm above proficient, and I'm different from my peers. I'm a high achiever somehow. But still, it wasn't too bad. Even though my parents and my teachers and everyone are treating me differently now, I still kind of have these dreams. I used to be a musician, and I didn't really see myself as a high achiever. But over time, we get past the Iowa Test of Basic Skills and through the TOS test. I'm from Texas. Through the TOS test, and then SATs and PSATs and national achievement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now we have a hierarchy that exists. And I view myself as a high achiever, and I think that to be a high achiever is the best thing that you can possibly be. And my peers who are high achievers, we're all happy sitting on top of the mountain, and everyone else kind of falls into their roles. Maybe it's a Joe Blow who was the B student, and he doesn't really care whether he gets good grades or not. He's kind of just going through the process. And then you have quote unquote slackers who are often actually the most brilliant people in the room, but they just don't care because everything that they do, their efforts are viewed as slacking because they don't perform well on standardized tests, or they don't care to perform well. And then finally we have the dreamers, and the dreamers are kind of just those crazy kids in the room that you look at and you're like, that's a bright kid, but I don't really know how to deal with this guy. And so there's this reinforcement cycle, and what happens is, in real life, if you think about the perceived consequences, I feel like I'm tall and I'm standing right in front of everything. If you think about the perceived consequences of failure over time, there's a point where you have a spouse, you have kids, you have mortgages, and there are some real consequences to failure. You have to really think about what it means to fail because people are dependent on you. But when you introduce high-stakes testing, all of a sudden, from a very, very early age, you perceive very high consequences of failure. And for whatever reason, high-stakes performance equals, putting a roof over your head or finding the person that you're going to love for the rest of your life or raising a kid. And me personally, I don't think that's how the world is supposed to work. And maybe you do, and if you do, I'm not going to knock that, because some people do have this mentality, and they move forward, and they go to Duke, and they go off to be a consultant, and they make a lot of money, and they can take care of themselves. And as educators, you should consider that a success. I think that's the utility that Brett spoke to. But if you do believe that, then I think you'll call my journey a journey from making it to breaking it. But actually, no, it's a journey from being to dreaming. So I left Duke, and I was at Big Blue, IBM, and got some Big Blue out there? Okay. And my time at IBM was characterized by a fear of being mediocre. Funny enough, the same fear I had at Duke when I had a fear of not being, I'm actually being that person now. I'm in a job which seems great on the surface. I get to travel around the country and tell people twice my age that I think I know what I'm talking about when I really don't. But in reality, I was bored, I wasn't challenged, and considering my background coming from an inner city area to that point at the present, I didn't really feel like I was being purposeful or doing anything with the blessings that had been bestowed upon me up until that point. So the next step, I won't really go into this too deeply because it's a long, complicated story, but I ended up at Stanford. I basically told myself, I read a book, What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20 by Tina Seelig, and she talked about the intersection of your passions and the marketplace and your skill set. And I told myself that I was passionate about education because I was fortunate to have the educational path that I had, considering so many of my peers who had failed to either violence or broken homes or poor educational systems. I told myself I was pretty fortunate and that that's something that I should really focus on. And then, of course, being at IBM and having an engineering background, I thought that's the path I wanted to go. So off to Stanford and to the Learning, Design, and Technology program, which is in the School of Education. And here I am again thinking about this high achievers mentality. It's like, oh, I got into Stanford, I'm a high achiever, you know. And not really thinking about, well, what is my purpose? I said I'm coming here, but what is my purpose? And then finally today, I would say I'm dreaming and acting towards purpose as a result of my overall path, as a result of my experiences at Stanford, as a result of feeling mediocre at IBM, and as a result of having security issues at Duke. So if you think about my path, it's something like this when you think about the consequences of failure. It was initially thinking that I was, you know, hot stuff, and then kind of being brought down to earth, and then going back again at Stanford, and then finally realizing that high achievement has nothing to do with how you perform on standardized tests or necessarily with academic achievement. And I'm not the only one. I have friends. Andrew, who was a big-time guy on Wall Street, and he couldn't take it anymore. He just felt like he was basically robbing people every day. And he's actually coming back in 2 weeks from the Philippines, 27 months for the Peace Corps, and going to the Kennedy School, of all places, to do foreign policy. Or there's Bill, who's another friend from Duke, and Bill is actually a rapper now. He used to be a management consultant, and he just played South by Southwest in Austin last week, and he's actually a successful rapper. And these are pseudonyms, so don't go look for Rapper Bill. And finally, there's Denise, who's a really good friend of mine, and Denise is, I always laugh at her because Denise was a consultant, and then she quit her job and moved to San Diego to be a waitress because she thought she wanted to go into acting, and she knew someone in San Diego, which is close to LA, and then she decided she was going to go to med school and got into UPenn Med School, and then she decided that she really wanted to be a graphic designer, and now she works for Adobe as a graphic designer, and so her path looks something like this. And so I know what you're thinking right now is like, you know, well, I've been on this journey, and first of all, I've been very fortunate to be at the high achiever level in the quote-unquote high achievers fallacy. And I've been on this journey, but so what? You know, that's kind of life. That's what happens. You know, people go through things, and they try to figure out what's best for them. And some people find what works, and some others don't, but it's kind of a journey we all go through. And oh yeah, we're here to talk about design thinking, so what's really going on? Well, if we think about my journey, it started off being driven by the high achievers fallacy, and then being driven to action by extraordinary circumstances at IBM, and then having a safe space to overcome my fear of failure at Stanford, and finally being driven to purpose to do what I'm doing today. And in reality, if you line these all up and think about the empathy, the experimentation, the iteration, the constant fear of failure, and getting over that failure, this is basically a macro level design thinking, right? I had to discover and empathize with the world around me and figure out where my true place was in the world, and hence realize that I was part of the high achievers fallacy to begin with. And then at IBM, I kind of had to realize, what are my real skill sets? What can I really do in the world? And also at Stanford, what can I try out? What can I learn from my experiences? And that's kind of the experiment part. And then finally, today, I'm producing. And I'm still failing plenty today. I can talk about that for hours, but today I'm producing and actually moving towards what drives me. So what if we could preempt hard life lessons with fun, relevant, authentic school lessons a la design thinking? What would that do? Well, I think first of all, we can break the high achievers fallacy. Understand that test scores and academic achievement is the utility piece of what we're doing in schools, but it is not an indicator of what students are able to achieve or impact in their lives. So I think that's the biggest thing, is breaking the high achiever's fallacy. Also, I think we should use the proper definition for failure. I'm a mechanical engineer by training, and I know what a real failure looks like, and it's not pretty. So let's just leave failure as a technical term for engineers, and maybe we can call it version 1, version 2, version 3, et cetera. Next, I think we have to realize that we have a lot of time to make our own lane. First of all, for our students, if you think about me, I was in the high achiever lane, and then I was feeling kind of mediocre, and then I thought I was back in the high achiever lane. And then I realized that really, I'm over here, I'm a dreamer, and I can go wherever I want. It doesn't really matter. So we have plenty of time to choose and make our own lanes, and students should realize that there are real things in life, special significant others, kids, putting a roof over your head, that where failure really does matter, but otherwise they should take action and feel free to find their own lane. And most importantly, I think we can all be dreamers, you know? Every day when I wake up and I work, I feel just like that kid who was in my grandmother's living room building a crazy tent city and putting Legos together. And I fail daily. It's a roller coaster. Sometimes I feel great, sometimes I feel bad. But I'm moving towards purpose, and I'm acting as a dreamer. And as the quote says, history has shown us all too often the consequences of dreaming poorly or not at all. So I hope later today what we can take from this experience is that design thinking is a way for us to really learn how to tackle life's hard lessons from a very early viewpoint, or a very early standpoint, and we can all be dreamers. Thank you.